Christian, I just got a calendar for a job, and the timeline is totally crazy. It's so short. Like, how do you stay organized during prep when these timelines are truncated like that?
There is so much to think about and no room for error.
None.
And to be honest, sometimes stuff falls through the cracks. I don't know. Have you ever bolted awake at 2 a.m. and screamed, Humane Society?
Oh, my God.
Or even like, oh, the caterer.
Oh, my God. The director wants fog and I didn't put it on the friggin' permit. Oh, it's insane. What gets me through these jobs, though, and even just my daily life, is checklists. I'm obsessed with checklists. That's the only way I can stay organized.
Even though we've been doing this for years, a solid checklist is super useful.
Yeah, even seasoned commercial pilots, like airline pilots who've been doing this for 25 years, use checklists for the most basic things. That's how important they are.
I'd like to think that my job is way more important than a pilot's job, but whatever. So we did a thing and made a new pre-production checklist. This one is built for contemporary filmmaking methods, and, it's also geared towards the way we're expected to work these days.
Yeah, which is crazy fast. So don't let anything slip through the cracks. Get the pre-production checklist. There's a link in our show notes where you can grab it, or you can just find it on our website, producershappyhour.com.
Go get it!
Lawrence, where do we even start? How do we even, I do all these things at my house to be more green but production can be so wasteful. So it can be overwhelming too. Just how do we even start?
People put out the blue buckets on set.
Yeah.
And then they check off
the water stations that went away during
water
COVID.
Stations
right, exactly.
that we don't have anymore. Mm-hmm. So, and then they check off okay, great, we're eco-friendly. But there's really a lot more to it. So we're talking today with Green the Bid, Julian Katz, one of the co-founders, and he's going to give us some basics that were actually surprising to me about what some of the biggest offenders on sets are and what we can do as producers to make our sets more eco-friendly.
A lot of them are pretty simple, so stay tuned, y'all.
Welcome to the Producers Happy Hour with your hosts, Sister Christian and Lawrence Lewis.
We're two producers with over 20 years of experience each, chatting over drinks about what it means
and what it takes to be a good producer.
Join us for insightful interviews and informative show topics that will help you get through your toughest jobs,
biggest production challenges,
and most difficult clients. So grab a drink.
You're going to need it.
And let's get to it.
Because making shit
is hard.
Sister Christian, I have missed you so much. How are you?
Fantastic. How are you, Lawrence?
I'm good. Oh, you're having a lovely tea, I see.
I'm a little under the weather today. I think it's just, everybody knows I just moved to LA like a year ago now, is it just? But never really had allergies before. And I think that, new location, still trying to get some local honey to spark, all of for some reason, I'm being a little affected right now. So apologize for my voice.
No
How are you doing?
I'm good. In it to win it, I guess, right?
As they say.
Or trying to stay sane amongst all the work and, things going on. It's like I have 5 jobs, because I've got production is one job. Mm-hmm. This podcast is another job. I don't know if anybody knows. I've got my house in Joshua Tree. Mm-hmm. That's another job, and my whole voiceover thing. So I've been juggling a lot. A nice break would be nice. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, we have to take care of ourselves first. We can't take care of anyone else unless we do, right? So
that's very true.
Well, today I'm excited very much about this show because it's near and dear to my heart. You know how wasteful film production can be. Listen, I know a lot of us try really hard and have definitely become more conscious about waste on sets, but there's an entire organization out there that can support and help you with this called Green the Bid. They're dedicated to making the commercial production industry more sustainable.
And today we're chatting with the co-founder of Green the Bid, Julian Katz. Welcome, Julian.
Hi, Julian.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Are you enjoying a cocktail with us for happy hour?
So right now I have a water and a coffee in front of me, but my normal cocktail, which I would normally be enjoying with you here, would be a mezcal Negroni.
Oh, one of our favorites. Yes.
Yes. I myself, since we're talking with Green the Bid, I'm having a green cocktail called a Midori Sour. which is which is two ounces of Midori, a half ounce of lime juice, a half ounce of lemon juice, 2 ounces of soda water. It's a build drink. Fill it up with ice. You're good to go. Garnish it with like a cherry or a lime slice if you're fancy. Christian, what are you drinking?
Today I'm having a little PG tips with a splash of bourbon just for my throat. This is medicinal, everyone. It's not,
medicinal. Health first.
Yeah, health first. But first, we cover a lot of topics on these episodes, and there's not enough time to dive in as deep as we would like. So we've created our listeners' newsletter.
The listeners' newsletter serves as our episode guide, and it contains all the links we mentioned in these episodes, and it dives deeper into the show topics as well as important industry news, which you need to stay on top of so you know what's going on in this business.
So if you're loving the show, which we already know that you do, and everything we chat about, which we already think is very informative, then head over to producershappyhour.com or click in the link in our show notes to sign up for the newsletter.
And do us a favor, after you get that first newsletter, write us back and just let us know what you think, because we live for your feedback.
All right. Julian Katz is a seasoned production expert who spent more than 2 decades, wow, that's a long time, in advertising agencies across the U.S. His work has been honored in every creative festival out there and sits in the permanent collection at MoMA. That's impressive. And he's now the co-founder of Green the Bid.
And Green the Bid is a nonprofit dedicated to shifting the commercial production industry to zero waste, net carbon neutral, sustainable, and regenerative practices. They bring together brands, agencies, production, and post-production companies, as well as crew and vendors to tackle this issue collectively. Welcome, Julian Katz.
Thank you.
Why don't you start by just giving us an overview of Green the Bid and what you are bringing to the production landscape?
Absolutely. Happy to. In 2000, in the first pandemic year, my co-founders and I got together to talk about this issue. We all come from different parts of the production industry. One of my co-founders, Katz, is similar to me, has a background in agency and brand production. Another, Michael, has a sustainable consultancy that individual productions can hire to green up their productions. Jesse Nagel has a communications firm called Hype, so she comes at it from the comms side. She deals with agencies and production companies, and has lots of different clients. And she also sits on the AICP West board. Finally, Gabby Kay, our fifth co-founder, comes from England, where she had been in commercial production. But on the production side in sales and as an EP, working with really great directors and agencies. And now she dedicates herself fully to this work. The rest of us, it's kind of our side gig. But we came together to try to figure out a way to tackle this issue. I think that if you've been on set and if you've ever thought about it, you've probably realized that production is incredibly wasteful, the way that we've always done it. We use all these net new materials. Whatever we're building, we build it up and we just tear it down, and most of it goes into landfill. Most of it was kind of net new to start with, which is maybe not necessary. We bring tons and tons of food on set, much more than we need usually, at least in commercials. And there's a lot of confusion about whether it's safe or legal to donate the excess. A lot of food waste gets just thrown out instead of composted. And, anything that's organic, that's decomposing gives off a lot more, a lot of methane, which is 10 times more harmful than carbon in the short term as a greenhouse gas. We fly a lot of people. I mean, coming from the agency side and the brand side now, essential personnel, and it's become laughable almost how many people end up in Video Village. I've been on productions where 15 people are just sitting there on their laptops all day. And they all flew from somewhere else. I've never been based in LA, so maybe it's different for LA based clients and agencies that end up shooting in LA a lot. But, the travel makes up a huge part of that carbon footprint of any production. So we all came together to say, how can we tackle this issue? Because if you've hired a consultant like Michael's, which is called Good Planet Innovation, or EcoSet, or Win-Win, or any number of other awesome consultancies out there, you've seen that there's a way to do this that doesn't hurt the creative, that doesn't make anyone's jobs any harder, that is really effective and is really easy for all involved. So we really just got together to educate the community about this, about how to do better, because we have to.
Absolutely. So, you said a couple key things here. budgets are shrinking and workloads are increasing, right? So this typically the burden kind of falls on, I shouldn't call it a burden. The ownership of this really falls on production's hands, who already have a lot going on. And, a lot of bids can't support any additional fees to help with, recycling sets or any of those kind of things that would need to happen. So there's a lot to dive in here, but can you give us like a bullet point list of what is the bare minimum production companies should be doing on set to help move us in the right direction? And then we can get into what are some of the bigger things we could be doing and involving Green the Bid with our actual on-set days.
I think that the bare minimum is usually we look at as kind of a last resort, because we really advocate for this to be done properly, for proper budget to be allocated to this so that it can be done in a really thorough, comprehensive way, that there be really thorough reporting on the back end of it, which is very valuable to the brands and the agencies to some degree. But obviously that's not always possible. So I would say a couple of things. One is we've just launched a complete how-to manual for sustainable production. It's on our website. It's just at the bottom of our site, which is greenthebid.earth. And that is a step-by-step just workflow for any production to do this, as well as if they had hired a sustainability consultant. It requires a lot of extra work to do it properly. So we also have, at the end of that document, we have something that we call, in case of emergency, break glass, which is basically just a bullet point of the bare minimum that you can do. So we've got a document called the top 5 things you can do. So that's everything from, getting rid of single-use plastics. That's kind of the poster child for this work. It doesn't have the biggest impact, but it is something that's very easy to avoid. Eliminate unnecessary travel. That's the most impactful thing. If you can, get rid of 2 people's flights, that's literally the most impact you can possibly have.
Can I please have you talk to the current agency that I'm working with?
Well, I know it's hard. I mean,
I'm not going to name names, but we're all flying internationally. I'm like, what? I know it's not a vacation.
What we're trying, and we understand, like, it's a complicated issue because partly this is the way it's always been done. Partly, I've seen more and more in my career, sometimes creative directors want to reward creative teams that may have touched the concept at some point, but ultimately their concept didn't even get chosen, or they were kind of the trainees and they want to bring them along to like reward them for their work.
Yes.
And that's obviously not being mindful of the carbon impact, but also I've always heard from production, it's really disruptive to have that many extra bodies on set that they want to keep it down to the decision makers if possible. So we understand if the job involves travel and the entire crew is going to be there, that it makes sense to have some creative decision makers there.
Of course.
So maybe someone from the client, some creative director level, or if the creatives themselves are empowered to make decisions, the agency producer. But beyond that, or maybe an account person, depends on how many clients are there. But I think that what we ask brands and agencies to do and ask production to advocate for is really just be mindful of that, to limit that as much as possible. We've also, the pandemic has proven it may not be fun to sit at home and watch on Zoom or whatever when as the shoot's going on.
Yeah.
But if you're giving someone that learning experience, they can still learn by watching that from home. Like if the people aren't essential decision makers, then I think that that's a pretty good way for them to still be involved.
100% agree with that. I think that, I know that some agencies did go the route of no clients come on set, that the creatives are empowered to, make those decisions. However, I've found that in those situations, you try something 5 or 6 different ways versus the way that because the client isn't there to cover their butts, right?
Oh,
exactly.
Yeah.
But what I'd also like to dive into, like, I would love to hear from you what, besides travel and one-time plastic use, like, what is a tip that people may not know about, like they may not be thinking about it, but something that could be almost, and I don't want to say easy because we should not be looking at it like that, but something that they won't already heavily burden our production teams with even more something. Like, what is something easy that they can do?
I personally think the food waste thing, travel and transport is the biggest. We've never measured this in the industry, across the industry. We're trying to get to a point where we can establish kind of a baseline benchmark for the impact of production. But
Right.
But what we know from looking at individual productions is that travel and transport is the largest, probably more than 50% of the impact
Which is
of any
sometimes
production.
out of our control as
Completely.
the production company, right?
But the second largest piece of this generally is food, catering, craft service. Like I said, methane has more environmental impact than carbon and is pretty avoidable. So yeah, I mean, it's vital that leftover food be donated. And that's actually one thing. There's a lot of myth about that. But in the United States...
Tell us about that. The myth is that it's illegal to donate food to a homeless shelter, leftover catering. Is that
It's actually not true at all. In fact, in Bill Clinton's presidency, there's a federal law enacted, basically like a Good Samaritan law, that protects anyone who donates food with good intention. If you don't know that the food is tainted, if you haven't had potato salad out in the desert for 12 hours. Like
a good rule of thumb is if you wouldn't eat it, then right.
Right. So if, as long as you aren't aware that anything's wrong with it, you're completely protected by federal law. So it's all 50 states. Many countries have this, like similar laws. Finding a place that will accept food that's not individually packaged can be tricky. We've actually published a map with the help of Smuggler. Andrew Colon at Smuggler had developed his own food donation map, and we've built on that, and we've expanded it to be more global. And it's just constantly updating. It's like a Google Maps based document, basically. But every time we find out about anyone that will accept food donations, we'll include that on the map, and we'll indicate whether it has to be individually wrapped or if it can just be shared meals.
I want to get that link from you, and we'll put it in our newsletter. But Christian, go ahead.
And I used to have a network of truck PAs in New York that would donate to their neighborhood churches. Like they would just call up and be like, so there was this network of people that we can all tap into as well. Yeah. And I love that you have a map because now we can combine forces, right?
There's a company called Everyday Action in LA that they mostly cater to film and TV, where they'll be camped out in the studio for all month. And they'll just come every day at the end of the day, take all the leftover food that can't get reused the next day and bring it to, shelters and people in need. That's the donation part. And then also it's just vital that we get into especially in LA where it's completely easy to do, that we get into composting of what we can't donate or consume. Like composting captures that methane emission. It completely prevents that methane from getting released into the air, and it creates like healthy soil. It's a total win to divert that from landfill and put that into composting is huge. And actually the food waste makes up, again, we don't have industry standards, but we've seen it make up as much as like 40% of all of the tonnage or whatever, the poundage of waste on set, including our department. So you're talking about like a lot of food is just thrown in the garbage and then it's just like sitting there reeking, creating methane. It's like, it's pretty bad.
Are there composting services that we could utilize to facilitate that? Absolutely.
I mean, it's basically about, I don't know if they'll come to you necessarily. I think you probably have to bring the waste to them. And some have different standards about what they'll accept. Another thing we try to educate everyone about is that quote unquote compostable plastic generally is not compostable. If you just take it to a standard composting facility, or if you try and compost it in your backyard, it won't work. You need to have a special facility that can handle that. So some cities that have composting, they'll tell you whether they accept those, again, quote unquote, compostable plastics or not. I think that there's a lot of industry around trying to capitalize on people's intentions to be more environmentally conscious. And
totally,
like boxed water, again, I don't want to, I'm just like boxed water is basically like in a milk carton, which is basically usually not recyclable because the plastic is fused to the paper. So if you have to use single use for water, use aluminum cans. It's 90% of all of the plastic that ever gets produced every year ends up in landfill or the ocean or the environment, whereas 75% of all of the aluminum that has ever been created in the 125 or 40 years since aluminum was first invented is still in circulation. So
that's amazing.
Aluminum is vastly superior to plastic when it comes to single use.
Hey, Christian, why are locations always such a hassle in our jobs?
I have a quick story for you, Lawrence, to explain why.
Bring it on.
I get all kinds of jobs, and sometimes there's celebrity interviews where the celeb may live in another market that isn't New York or LA. So I have to find a location near their home because it's just an interview. Nobody's paying for a scout for that stuff. So I use a lot of those marketplaces, but that can be a huge time suck.
Oh, God. I do a lot of experiential, and I'm typically on way before I have a budget to bring on a scout. And I got to do a lot of pre-research on locations. Yeah, I've used those marketplaces too, but there's like a million steps between seeing a listing on one of those marketplaces, loving it, actually seeing it in person, and then securing it. It's just such a time suck.
Yes, and I can speak from experience because that's where our friends from Ave come in.
Yes, Ave is the first nationwide location scouting company. Not only do they have a marketplace where you can just, look at options for yourself, they have a concierge service where they access a private network of locations all over the country. It saves you so much time and money, and it helps you find the right location for wherever you need to shoot.
Exactly. So I just went on their site. I filled out a simple, quick form. I was paired with an amazing location producer, and then I received a curated report with multiple location options for my project. From there, they handled everything, including scheduling the walkthroughs, even on a Sunday morning at 9 a.m.,
nice.
to negotiating the location agreement. And I didn't need a permit, but they actually offer that service too.
And the most amazing thing about them is that there are no upfront costs. They only get paid if you book the location that they found, which is like so crazy.
Save time, money, and your sanity by adding Ave to your producer's toolbox. Just visit Ave at Ave.com. That's AVVAY.com.
Would it be beneficial for production as it goes so far as to eliminate beef from catering or those types of things?
If you can get away with it, that's
oh yeah,
an
I can
amazing.
tell. I feel like I'm strong enough to tell people what the fuck we're at.
Well, I think it depends on the will of the team that's dealing with.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of perception, probably some of it correct, that some of the crew is going to really be upset if they don't have their meat
not
options.
anymore.
But I think we found actually that if the catering provides good vegetarian options and people actually try that, then sometimes they are converted and they actually enjoy that. We definitely would advocate for having less meat on set. So always having vegetarian options at the very least, or if you're doing a multi-day shoot, maybe having a vegetarian day.
I've heard from Local 52 guys for years that, especially in commercial production, that, they'll have 3 or 4 different shoots with 3 or 4 different companies on the same week. And, one day shoots, just line them up and then they've worked that week and they get the same catering each day, or it's so heavy that there are systems. So on it, and then we all get to a certain age where we have we're watching our red meat intake, right? So I don't think that it's too hard of a stretch. People are definitely healthier than they were when I first started in the 90s.
Yes.
When it was like omelet bars and waffle stations and
breakfast burrito every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but that stuff's kind of gone away. So I do think that the transaction is actually thoughtful. If you're having a one-day shoot, just don't take the beef option. I think that's an easy thing.
I mean, I do too. And you're totally right. If I've ever been on a long shoot, a week-long shoot, or even like a month-long shoot, you're eating so much more than you would at home or in the office or whatever. Just because the food's always being presented to you. And sometimes you get a good caterer and it's just like, or like great craft service, and you just want to eat everything that they put in front of you, but it's so much more than we need.
Pass around sort of my pet peeve. You know what? I get it, but no. Everybody can stand up and walk 50 feet to craft service and get a yogurt. I know. So, but that's just me, and I think that I personally feel it's a bit wasteful. But again,
but that's another thing, and we have. We publish a ton of resources. All of the resources that we've ever put together are free on our site. Anyone can use them. And often we'll put those together at the request of one of our members or someone we talk to. Both the food, we have a composting resource. I don't even remember if I mentioned that, but we've looked into composting options in most of the major cities that people shoot in the States. And so that's on our site. That was put together at the behest of, a member that was asking about that. Same with the food donation map. And we've put together checklists for all the different crew departments to abide by. And for catering and craft service, I mean, single use is kind of so standard. There's so many single use little cups and just plates and everything. And so we've put together some guidance for how they can do that better, or at least do it with, instead of using plastic, use bamboo utensils. That's another thing.
Right.
People use COVID as kind of an excuse. I mean, COVID's complicated, obviously, for our industry. It's amazing how we were able to keep producing during that time when it was like pretty locked
Tell
down.
me about it.
But a lot of, and so even though we were traveling less and we were like gathering less people to consume less, most likely, we also, a lot of the sustainability guidelines kind of went out the window because everyone was having to answer to the COVID, safety officers on set. And obviously safety first, but those people mostly were advocating for single use, and single use equals single use plastic in most cases. But we've got guidance for catering where we say, even during COVID, if you have single use like cardboard packages and use bamboo utensils wrapped in paper instead of, it's just as safe as plastic wrapped in plastic. And obviously it's going to have a much smaller impact. And if you're composting, you can compost all that.
The resources alone, because I think that, doing nothing versus doing 5 of the things that you're suggesting is it just becomes a mindset, and it impacts for sure the bottom line.
What does the full package for you look like? Like if you were to come in, partner with a TV show or a feature film, I assume you send people to set. I assume you handle a lot of this. What does the full Monty look like?
We actually don't. We're just a nonprofit. We're a community. We're a grassroots, advocacy group. We bring all those stakeholders together, like you mentioned, clients, brands, agencies, production, post, and crew and vendors. And we tackle all of this collectively. We share resources. We bring people together to discuss, successes and failures, et cetera. But when it comes to actual individual productions, we've vetted a bunch of consultancies that you can use that does come at a cost. And we've provided that resource that I mentioned earlier, the complete production how-to. If for whatever reason you can't use a consultancy because you're shooting somewhere where they're not, or your budget is too strapped or whatever. But we've also audited all the consultancies to figure out what an average cost is to do this properly. And that cost is about 1% on top of the production costs. And really, for an agency, we look at production and post if you want to do this properly.
Right.
The different consultancies have slightly that goes into slightly different places. They categorize it slightly differently, but we've also broken down a range of what that cost is going towards line by line, so that if procurement, cost control, whatever is challenging it or just wants to know what that cost is, that's kind of the backup that you can provide. But that basically goes for the staffing of people to manage this process from, there's a little bit of staffing during prep where they're talking to all the different department heads and just, kind of discussing how to tackle this on that particular production. But then it's on set. There's usually a couple of bodies that are there managing all of the waste, the resource recovery stations. So instead of thinking about it as all trash, we look at it as, recycling, composting, and then landfill. And hopefully you're seeing a lot less stuff going to landfill than either of those others. Right. So someone's managing, manning those stations, renting the kit to manage that. They're taking all of that to dispose of properly. And then they're also in the background, they've been working with art department to figure out if there's an opportunity to donate materials or even entire set pieces to local theaters or schools. So it works out to about 1% of the production. I think that there could be potentially some cost savings as well. If you're sending less to a dump, then you're paying less
for sure.
To dispose of that. You're paying your truckers less. Or they have less to throw away. Hopefully they have less trips to take.
Hey, Lawrence, do I have a story for you?
Oh, boy.
I got totally boned by a script.
Oh, no. This has happened to me before. Yeah. What happened?
Well, I missed something. I was reading it, breaking it down, and I completely missed something important. It was just, little blurb, I thought. But in the end, it totally fucked me.
Oh. Was it a chariot race?
What?
Do you not know this term?
Yes. No.
Cherry race. It's from Ben-Hur. They were filming Ben-Hur, and the huge climax of the movie was just one line in the script. Whoever broke it down just gave it a 1/8 page marker, and it was, then there's a chariot race.
That shit looked like it took 3 weeks to film.
And it did.
Yes.
It was only scheduled for a couple hours in an afternoon because nobody really understood what was meant by a chariot race.
Yes, that was improper breaking down of said script, it says.
Exactly, which is why we developed a course called The Art of Script Breakdowns.
Yeah, the people have spoken. You guys wanted it, so we did it.
Exactly. We did a thing. And not only is it just script breakdowns, yeah, okay, sounds simple, whatever. No, but this is from a producer's perspective. Because, a lot of times you can get a little lazy and just give the script, read it over, and you think, okay, I got it. Give it out to your department heads and let them kind of deal with it. But if you're not breaking down the script before you give it to your department heads, you might miss the freaking chariot race.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely said, hey, production designer, could you take a look at this and let me know what you think without reading it first or looking at it from art department's perspective, right? So really, when you break down a script, you need to be looking at it from each department. So we walk you through exactly how to do that.
Right. And we teach you what to look out for from things like time of day. What if you had a minor in every single shot of the script? How are you going to do that? and they're supposed to be 6 years old. What are you going to do?
Yeah, and only one day of filming. Guess what?
You're in a little bit of trouble. So we put together a comprehensive course that focuses on efficiency, accuracy, clarity. It's a very nuanced approach that will ensure you that you can find and discover all the pitfalls that may occur during your pre-production.
We also show you step by step how to take this knowledge and explain it to your director, your producer, your agency, everybody, so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, you can't just be, freaking out because, there's not enough time, there's not enough money. You need to do the work, break it down, show people why things aren't adding up so you can all be on the same page and solve those problems together before they become costly mistakes.
Please sign up now, learn a few things, laugh a little, have a cocktail.
Yeah, make yourself a drink and we'll dive into it and show you all of our tips and tricks. Just go to our website, producershappyhour.com, or click the link in the show notes to sign up.
Yes, do so now because it's on sale for a very good price until May 5th.
What used to kill me doing commercials for 20 years in New York City was, we would go into a stage, put a subfloor of birch plywood at the time, I don't know, $35 to $50 a sheet. Then completely build a set, and then there was nothing to do with it, which I know Ava totally revolutionized everything when she started up her company, but it was so wasteful. And props, when you would start to talk about the carpenters or the props or anything, it was just can you, is there a TV show that can use some of this plywood? Is somebody building a house? Our truck BAs will bring you this plywood as somebody building a house, anything. And you would try to network, and it was so much work. However, you would try, right? And it seems like these days there's so many more resources in order to just make a phone call and get that stuff to somebody who needs it versus a landfill, right?
Yeah. I mean, So if you're working with a consultancy, they already are tapped into, lots of different potential, people and organizations that would accept those resources. But I think that's the idea. That's the mindset shift that we're really looking for. It's waste limitation, but, looking at all of this as resources that are, largely recoverable. And it's really, looking at where we can get away from this kind of net new, build it, scrap it, move on, and with
totally.
Productions, like you said, it can be one day. You can build this massive set and just throw it all out after 1 day, 2 days of shooting with it. Film and TV is probably a little ahead of commercials in terms of this world and just thinking about this, but they also, they might have larger productions, but they also will go camp out in a studio for, a month or 2 months, or they'll so that their footprint's actually much more limited, and they're using those resources a lot more than we do, just inherently, but based on the nature, the length of our shoots.
The nature of commercials. Yeah. Are you looking for commitments from production companies to kind of be under the Green the Bid umbrella? And if so, what do those commitments look like?
That's a great question. I should have mentioned that earlier. So when any company joins Green the Bid, they're pledging to uphold a certain commitment. So If you're a brand, you're pledging to cover these costs. We don't want to put these costs on production or agencies. Agencies and production are getting squeezed. The way that the industry is going, the brands are wanting more for less, and agencies feel that as much as production, believe it or not. So agencies don't want to squeeze their production partners. It's the brands' budgets that are usually forcing that. But if a brand joins Green the Bid, we ask them to pledge to commit to cover those costs. So we say it's about 1% of every production. That's obviously going to flex up and down depending on the needs of that production, just like any other department. If you're shooting in 10 different locations, it's different than if you're sitting in a studio. And, so if you're an agency, you're pledging to advocate to your clients to cover that cost. If you're a production, you're pledging to include it in your bid, and also to research what it'll actually take to get it done properly. So that's talking to a consultancy or really doing the work and educating yourself on how to do it yourself. Post is interesting, actually. Originally, we were really looking at in-office practices, food practices, but data storage has a huge footprint. Cloud storage.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I have so many hard drives at my house from so many years of keeping the second one on hand just because we needed it.
I think right now there's no standard in our industry for deletion and retention. Hard drives are bad. Cloud storage is way worse.
Oh wow.
Really?
Yeah. Clouds. I mean, it seems invisible, but that means that servers are running and fans are going and electricity is being used to have this stuff be accessible in real time, always in perpetuity. And we're just putting all of our we're just putting more and more data into the cloud without thinking about it, because it's the cloud. It's invisible. It has no weight to it, but it's actually incredibly wasteful.
Burdensome. Yeah.
So I really don't want to misquote the numbers, because in one of our member meetings recently, we had a company present to us about this issue, about the average cost for cloud storage, the average kind of carbon cost for cloud storage versus drive storage versus LTO tape. And LTO tape is by far the most stable and environmentally sound option.
LTO tape.
So for deep storage, especially after months or years have gone by and no one's like, what is the likelihood anyone's going to need to access this information, like the raw data, pretty much ever. But also, if they do they need to access it like now, or can they wait a day and get it off the LTO archive?
Well, it would definitely take a day to get it anyway, no matter what.
Right. So anyway, that's a conversation we're getting into with the post community right now. We're also engaging AICP and the ANAs and the 4As and trying to establish a standard for who's responsible. Also, insurance plays a large part in this, because no one really knows who's responsible. So we're also working with insurance companies to try and figure out, like, just establish for once and for all who's responsible, who holds on to it, what format that is in, how long they have to hold on to it, et cetera, so.
Yeah, and I think I personally think it comes from part of the culture of never wanting to say no or always having the solution, because we expect that of producers and production anyway. So I think it comes from that culture as well of just like always having an option.
Yeah.
Or always having your butt covered, right?
Yeah, and then sofas in the van.
But totally. And 100%. It's very well meaning. I think everyone's just trying to.
But nobody wants to be the one to say no or to set limitations on that or expectations.
But if there was an industry standard that everyone was expecting, then
I just say let's go with taxes. Let's just go with the IRS rule. Like after 7 years, that's it. Don't expect it.
Yeah.
See, solved it. Next. No.
Yeah.
Well, I love what you're saying about shifting the ownership from production and agencies back to the brands. That is
they're the ones who are advertising.
Oh, and actually,
really
I didn't
smart.
even totally answer your question, which is we know that most people will just be very early in their journey and in this work. We know that we're the first resource of our kind to talk to this community about this issue. What we really demand of our members is to come to this work with integrity of intention. So basically, we are going to strive to do this better. We are going to try to uphold these commitments. We're not going to audit you, and kick you out if you're not doing it properly. And sometimes it's out of your control. If you're a production company, if you're an agency, sometimes the client's just not going to pay for it. And sometimes, whatever, you're shooting in the desert and you just couldn't find, a way to hydrate people without the plastic water bottles. It happens. Like we understand that. But if we all keep this top of mind, if we all join this conversation and really try to tackle this collectively, we can do better. And we've already seen a huge shift in the industry in the 2.5 years since we launched. We're seeing people, we're seeing agencies ask production companies to green the bid, and they don't even necessarily know what that means. But then the production company will come to us and say, what does that mean? What's the expectation here? And so we're like, this conversation has become very top of mind all of a sudden, which is not the case 2.5 years ago.
And that was going to be my next question, because, okay, yes, we're talking on the top level of agencies and brands and production companies and whatnot, but there could be a producer out there listening to this episode who maybe does some smaller jobs, and they want to call you and they want to do the right thing. And what can they expect if they pick up the phone or email Green the Bid and say, hey, I want to make my next job as environmentally sound as possible. How can you help? Or how can I work with you? What does that conversation look like?
Yeah, I mean, we have those calls all the time. I mean, I think we can point to individual resources that we put. I mean, chances are, we've already built something that will help that individual do what they can, even without that support. I mean, again, we really do advocate strongly for, we look at it as the same equation as literally like safety on set. Like you don't,
interesting.
You never walk away from a set that had a stunt saying like, wow, that was such a safe production. Like, of course it was safe. It was like, that's the responsible way to produce this work, is to have stuntmen and rigging and a pad and everything.
Yeah.
As far as we're concerned, it's the same, with sustainable production. It should just become industry standard. Our deepest desire is that 5 years from now, we can just not exist anymore because everyone's doing this right. So we really do want brands to start thinking of this as a cost of doing business. If those resources aren't there, if people are just doing it themselves, we definitely have a ton of resources that they can use. They can look at that
fantastic.
complete production how to, they're free to just go through our site and just grab all of those checklists and all of the sample like on-set signage and call sheet language and whatever else we've put together for them. They're free to. They don't have to be members. The company they're working for doesn't have to be a member. People can take this on as an individual. That's how it always worked. I mean, that's how we've amassed this knowledge and this information that we're sharing out, is that this was all the work of individuals who cared to try to do better. And now we're trying to make that more of a universally accepted standard.
We'll get your website at the end of this, but our producers out there can go to your website, get a bunch of resources, bunch of checklists, a lot of information.
And they should reach out. They should reach out to us, hello@greenthebid.earth, or just use the contact form on our website. We'll get back to them, as quickly as we can. We'll set up a call. We'll point them in the right direction. There's a ton of resources, so if it's a little overwhelming, we're always happy to jump on the phone.
That's what I'm trying to get it down to some bullet points. But like we talked about, like travel is a big one. Getting less people to travel. Food is another big one. And
single-use plastic.
And single-use plastics.
Go digital. Don't print anything. You really don't need to print. You never print.
Thank goodness we're kind of there. After COVID,
pre-pro books have basically gone completely digital.
Well, then you get on set, and then there's a client who's like, I need it printed. Can I get it printed? Then all of a sudden, everyone wants it printed, and then you just made 20 of them.
Well, try at least go in with the intention of not doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are kind of the bare bones, but then it gets a lot deeper, obviously, the deeper you care to go with it.
And it's about shifting education and shifting people's mindsets. It's like education and just starting, because once you start thinking about it, it becomes second nature, and then you just do it. And that's where our goal is.
100%.
I love it. Mm-hmm.
Julian, thank you so much for joining us today for a little happy hour. The contact information again.
The website is greenthebid.earth, and the contact email is hello@greenthebid.earth.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Christian, how do people get a hold of you if they want you?
sisterchristianproduces.com. And Lawrence, how do they get you if they want you?
LawrenceTLewis.com.
Amazing.
Thanks, Julian.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Producers Happy Hour is brought to you with the help of the handsome Christopher Daniels,
who is a design and branding specialist,
and Brendan Russell at podlad.com, who is our fabulous editor.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to dive deeper, subscribe to our listeners' newsletter. Simply go to producershappyhour.com to sign up.
Thanks for listening, and remember,
enjoy happy hour while you can.